Kasia Bałucka-Dębska. I work in the European Commission on the Startup and Scale-Up Initiative. I have, we can hear Jonathan as well. You can pick whom you prefer to listen to. I can sing, but you don't want that really. I have my director here, Christine Schreiber. She's responsible for the SME policy and COSME program. It's the first ever program for SMEs, and we hope we'll have another one in the new financial framework. We have Freddie Nurski with us, who represents Gen Europe. There will be a nice celebration at the end of this workshop. I will not reveal exactly what will happen, but we're very happy about the developments. And I have a presentation which has a lot of slides, because you know when you come from the Commission you have to have at least 30 slides with a lot of text on it. But it's there not so that we go through everything, but that afterwards you can really find the links and the elements that we will describe. But before we start, I just wanted to know who is here in the room, in the Plexi sphere. Are you who's entrepreneur? Okay, so we have some policy makers or ecosystem builders, so more on the also. Okay, you're both. Okay, so this is fantastic. And now, to help us guide a little bit what we will show you, why did you come here? Like, if there was one thing you would like to leave from here, what kind of information would it be?
I'm here just to learn what are the instruments and also the institutions of European Union for entrepreneurs and also for SMEs, just to get some knowledge about it.
Okay, so the question was, what are the institutions, what we are doing for the entrepreneurs, where you can find information or money, I guess. Anybody else? Anything else? Something specific?
Well, I would like to know what are the possibilities of funding or facilitating knowledge transfer and tech transfer between startups or between universities. So one step before being an enterprise, maybe. I want to know the tools at this level.
The tool for transfer. Okay. This is more or less it. I'm going to step out to ask that they switch it back on. Can I hand over to you just to do an introduction of like the elements we have, because there was a question about what is there. And then for Freddie, because he also has an overview in Belgium and also in Europe, what are the different institutions that you have to look at?
Kasia is very clever, because we agreed that she would do all the work. So, no, I'm very happy to be here. Also, I have to say, the older you get, the acoustics get more challenging, you know, so I hope you can hear me. So I'm in charge of this big COSME program, which has many, many different facets. And I think what we would want to do, and I mean, I'll see, is that fundamentally you get an idea on the different aspects we're touching upon, and then you can dig deeper. And for instance, one of the things I would really like you to be aware of is our Enterprise Europe Network. Who has heard about Enterprise Europe Network? Well, that's a start. It's actually the biggest SME support organization in the world. We have 600 centers across the world, with obviously a focus on Europe. The whole advice they provide is for free. And I would really advise you may not know them under the label Enterprise Europe Network. You may know them under label of Chamber of Commerce or Innovation Agency. So there's always a host.
Sorry?
Is this thing out?
Yes, they cannot hear.
Okay, I'll try to. Okay, but he changed something. It was not to my own defense. You put something on which was not on beforehand. So I was saying the Enterprise Europe Network is the biggest support network for SMEs worldwide. And you may not know them under that name, but they're always embedded in a host organization. It may be a Chamber of Commerce, it may be an innovation agency, depending on the country. And this is really a wonderful point of call. Of course, they're all human beings, so they may work better in some countries than in others. But they actually provide service to SMEs and startups, giving advice both on how to innovate, how to make sure you find markets outside your own country. So they're all linked together. If you're thinking, well, I would like to export to this or that European country, or I would actually like to go to China or somewhere else. So they do provide this advice. And very recently, and that I think fits very well with some of the other sessions here, we have a whole new system of scale-up advisors. So they really go through the business, they give advice how to scale. And as I said, I think the very interesting thing is that all this advice comes for free. They can network you with other organizations. And so it's just like one particular aspect I would like to pick on, because I always realize I've been now doing this job for 3 years, and I realize that those people who know it, they're extremely happy, but many people still don't know it because sometimes they go a bit into hiding, I would say, into their host organization. So, I mean, if there's one thing, many others as well, but if there's one thing to take away here, have a look where your local Enterprise Europe network is and get in touch. And also, please let us know if they don't work well or you don't think you get any service. Let us know as well, because as I said, we're all human beings, they're all different setups, and for us it's really crucial that this is a support system which works. So I'll stop here. This is one particular aspect I wanted to pick, unless you want me to say anything about Erasmus. Do you have the slides? Okay, then I'll hand back to Kasher.
Okay, but I just wanted to ask Freddie, like from your point of view in Belgium, like if you were asked that question, where do I go for support? Belgian support or European support? What would you say?
Well, I think it's, first of all, very dependent country by country. So I can say about Belgium, what we have done is we got much closer to the existing representatives of the existing businesses. So the SME bodies or the Ministry of SMEs and also the local Chamber of Commerce. And just the fact by getting in there and looking up the information, it's a treasure of information that's there. So that will help you to find the right way and also to put yourself forward very often as a candidate, either a candidate as an expert or a candidate as a partner for different projects. So it's not always that easy to find, but I think that's what with the GEN network in Europe, we're trying to structure that a little bit and also make it more accessible. And what we will do in the next 12 months is also have in the countries meetings with the same type of bodies, so we can then hopefully liaise by the next SME week, where we can then cooperate and bring people more together in order to facilitate the access.
Okay, any follow-up questions to this?
For the European Enterprise Network, is it possible to become a new member, or is it a closed shop? How does that work?
Do you want to collect, or? Let's collect. Yeah. Let's see.
Hello, wonderful to hear this. I didn't know about this. I'm from Nepal. I'm Suman Chakia. And I just checked your website. I didn't see Nepal listed. So is it hidden somewhere, as you said, with other? Okay. Right. So then the follow-up question would be here. What do we do?
No, maybe just briefly in a nutshell. I mean, it's not a closed shop, but it is a closed shop to the extent that we have regular calls for tender. So we have a period of time, and it's usually consortia. And so you have, for instance, usually, I mean, since there are two aspects covered. One is sort of internationalization within the EU and beyond, and the other one is innovation. It's usually a teaming up of chambers of commerce, innovation agency, local regional development agencies. So, I mean, the next call will be out for the next financial period, so I think in a year's time or so. I was rather sort of suggesting this to you as using the services, because I mean it's of course quite you need a big consortium, it's quite a heavy investment, you have to have deliverables and so on. So I think it's probably a big step for, let's say, a small organization. I don't think it actually fits. I was rather thinking from the other end that you can use the services, link up with them, also advise people you're in touch with to use the services, because I said it's a big infrastructure. And just to specify one thing, within Europe we co-finance. So this consortia basically well, roughly half of the money comes from the organizations themselves, half of the money comes from the call for tender. Outside Europe, we call them business organizations. They don't get any financing at all, but they get access to the network. So we have some quality standards. They have to basically demonstrate that they really link up with their SMEs in their country, because the objective is that they help European SMEs which want to export into that country. And on the flip side, they get access, for SMEs from that country to the European network, which is of course very valuable in terms of contacts. They organize lots of matchmaking events, often in very specialized area, because if you start up in a particular area, you may be very interested to find out that there's a particular matchmaking event. Let's say if you're in environmental cleanup technology or in, marine stuff or whatever, and that is actually very useful. It's not like that you have to have an existing organization, and then basically it's you get the access, but we don't finance outside.
But I think in the longer term, because so far I think as part of EN you either have chambers of commerce, but we are, especially for Erasmus for young entrepreneurs that I will mention now, that also operates through these intermediaries. It would be interesting for our usual membership to get reinvigorated by new types of organizations. From my experience as a project officer for these consortia, not for the EN but for the Erasmus, the best way if you want to join as this intermediary is to start with existing consortium, to join them, to learn, because it's a know-how, it's an investment like with any tender writing. You have to know what to write and how to write, and you have to understand how it works. So what I've seen for the consortia that we're forming for Erasmus for young entrepreneurs, it's better to join first the existing thing, the existing consortium, and then you either stay with them or you develop your own. But it would be interesting to get reinvigorated. So if you have some further questions on that, let me know. I am going to just quickly whiz through this. This presentation, as I said, has everything, but it's interesting both for policymakers to see what is Startup and Scale-Up Initiative, how many levels it has, to realize from the policymaker point of view, it's really hard as well. So we need each other, because, from our offices, okay, we have access to a lot of knowledge, but we really need your feedback as well. And then there will be some very specific links to programs that we have. And then if you have questions or clarifications, just stop me. So it's scaling up, the text. So before we wrote it, we sort of asked, it's called public consultation, and I always, it's horrible to take part in it because it's always a very long questionnaire, but that's because it's complicated and we really want to know. So we asked what were the biggest obstacles to starting and to scaling, and as our policy now concentrates more on the scaling up, because we say, and the literature supports it, that starting up in Europe, it's not so complicated. In most places there is even money more or less available. Where it's hard, it's when you want to scale up your company, because in Europe, especially venture capital funds are much smaller, and there's much less capital available for second and third rounds of financing. So this is what came up, that securing the financing of expansion is problematic. Employment law, I'm bringing it up because this is actually really the competence of the member states. So even if we, as the Commission, propose something, it really has to come from the national governments. And it's a more or less personal plea. I think the most briefings I've ever written was on why there is no Google in Europe. And everybody agrees they want the next unicorn or the next Google, although if you have been to Daniel Eisenberg's session today, he's also very much about scaling up traditional companies. And where we come from, our corner of the Commission, we're also very much about traditional companies, how they can scale, especially mid-sized companies, because they have the size. And so everybody agrees there should be, we are 500 million market in Europe. Why there isn't a next Google? And then you talk to the politicians, and they want to have the next Google, and the entrepreneurs want to be able to do business across borders seamlessly. And then if from Brussels you try to propose something to to break down a bit some of the barriers that still persist. It's like, oh, no, but this we cannot do because that's sovereignty. I'm on purpose making it a bit more dramatic than it is. But the plea is the following. If you talk to your national governments and politicians, tell them to look beyond their region, beyond their city. Because for Europe to have the scale-ups, we have to have the real single market. And then the paradox is, and we heard it from, I'm speaking under my control, this is my boss, so she can correct me if I... apparently in the US, if you want to do financial transactions, business in fintech, you have to acquire 51 licenses, one for each state. In Europe, even if for some areas there would still be big barriers, it would be only 28. But actually, it rarely happens nowadays. But still, somehow, the perception is that it's so much easier to go to the US. And in many cases it is, because there's a lot of money and there's one language. But let's not get caught up in this sort of thinking, it's always easier. And I think you Christine, have been in Berlin, and you have heard from some entrepreneurs who have gone through a program in the US. I don't know if you want to share the...
No, just, I mean, that's, I think clearly you mentioned banking. I mean, we have a single passport, so it's not 28, it's actually one. So, and then there are many other areas where, I mean, I think our strengths in Europe is that we always look at our weaknesses. I'm always making the joke, Europe and women have one thing in common, that we always see our weaknesses and we're often less good at putting forward what we can do. I mean, it's just a bit of caricature, but when you do interviews, I do a lot of interviews with people, and it's really striking this, and I think Europe has a bit the same attitude, which I think is very positive, because you always see what you have to do better and where you have to improve. But I think it's actually very healthy when you speak to outsiders. And this was a program which was attracting actually top young European entrepreneurs and gave them also training in the US. And this was a final event. And what they said is that they see many interesting things in the US, but they actually all they were happy that they were in Europe and they want to continue doing business in Europe. And I thought that was a great message, which again doesn't mean that everything is perfect, but in many areas we are actually, I mean, for instance, VAT is a great achievement if you're a small company. I mean, this is so much, I mean, you can actually export to other countries. So I think it's very good to look at all these points we have. And indeed, as far as skill is concerned, I think this is, I mean, skilled laborers, I mean, people you need to recruit. This is a big issue. I mean, there are countries actually working a bit at national level. Many do attract, actually, and give a startup visa or visa for highly qualified people. And as Kasia said, I mean, this is something which we can partly address at European level, partly not. But so I think we have come, and I was actually quite happy to hear this, because I think we have come quite a long way since we started this startup scale-up policy. And I think I'm not actually saying that it's because everything we have done, but I think we have launched a positive spirit. I mean, unless you want to contradict, and please feel free if you think there are still many things which need to be done. But I think overall we have quite a thriving ecosystem. When you see how some of the hubs have developed, I mean, and I think this is really our big strength. That links up. I mean, we both went to the talk this morning by Dan Isenberg, and I think it was really interesting because of the impact on the regional ecosystem. And I think this is something where we can actually teach, and where we have some interesting aspects in Europe, because we have important startup hubs. Not only in the obvious places, I mean, like Berlin has now become a big hub, I mean, all big capitals, but also, I say, countries which were sometimes quoted as a bit lagging behind, you know, like Lisbon is now a really attractive startup place. Also, a couple of years ago, it was still very much focused on traditional industry. I mean, I'm looking, you know, I mean, in Greece and other countries, I'm sure are going to be, will make it with a bit of effort by specializing in particular, maybe in the food area, you know, with innovation and so on. So I think we have this unique opportunity here, and we need, of course, constantly your support also in terms of feedback, what we still need to do better and where we have to do, what we have to do more of, I would say, and also possibly what we need to do less of. Huh?
Thank you. 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 Yeah, so the regions you have mentioned, there's something called European Entrepreneurial Region. For anyone trying to design any sort of strategy around entrepreneurship, I really encourage you to have a look, because the nice thing about it, it's not only the most advanced ones, there are also the less advanced ones, so everybody can find an area, geographical and in terms of economic, socioeconomic indicators that's sort of similar to what they need. Okay, so this is what we collected as challenges. And then the Startup and Scale Up initiative came up because it's about job creation. So it's not about growth for the sake of growth, it's about jobs. This is just to show you, again, if anyone in any country tries to attempt to make policy for scale-ups, this is, I think, only half of what you have to look at. And it's in 3 categories: removing barriers, creating opportunities, and providing finance. And the removing barriers goes from information through company law, once only principle, so that it's done digitally, so that you don't have to go to spend time in the offices, local offices. It's about tax, which of course for Europe is specific. Then in terms of creating opportunities, it goes through public procurement, IPR, skills, innovation. How do you matchmake the more innovative startups with the less innovative companies, and as they can be really useful for each other? And then finance, and specifically for Europe, as mentioned, there are already many instruments out there. So there are loan guarantees, for instance, and I'm mentioning it because as we, as the European Commission, work through intermediaries, so your local banks in your city, sometimes you don't even know that you got a loan because of the guarantee from the EU. So as we're in the spirit here to sell, and I've worked in sales before, I want to sell to you the fact that many of the loans that go to SMEs nowadays have actually been guaranteed by our COSME program. And then the second big thing, so you have the 3 most important financing instruments. It's Horizon 2020, which is research and innovation. You have the COSME, which is dedicated to SMEs, and you have the cohesion funds, which are then managed on the national level. There's crowdfunding mentioned because we have done some intellectual work as to what needs to happen for crowdfunding to take off and for SMEs to be able to use it better. And then there is the European VC Fund of Funds. It has been fully launched a couple of days ago, and I will get to it when we get to the slide. So this is the political and policy level. This is what you have to think about in the ecosystem. And in terms of removing barriers, I will whiz through that because we mentioned it. Second chance, this is important. The proposal for making the second chance easier in Europe is out from Commission hands. So now, and it's about making insolvency and discharge procedures quicker and easier, because in some countries it takes 10 years after you have failed as an entrepreneur, and it cannot be. In some countries it's quicker. So we have proposed some more decent times so that you can really get up again once you fall. And then there's the navigating information. So I'm happy to see you here because a lot of what we do actually people don't know. The Enterprise Europe Network has been mentioned already. You have the link. What it does: international partnerships, advice to international growth, support to business innovation. The second one, this is one of my favorite ones. You know Erasmus, right? For students. So this is Erasmus, but for entrepreneurs. People, again, don't know it exists. What you can do, you can be either, I put the host entrepreneur because for us it's more difficult to find the host entrepreneurs. As a host entrepreneur, you get a person who comes to you from a different country for between 1 to 6 months. And then you are, it's not that you are just a mentor or a coach, you're supposed to be like business partners. And while it's easier to imagine the benefits to the young entrepreneur who's going to learn from you, it's more difficult to imagine the ones that you would get as a host. But we hear from them that you get the fresh ideas, you get the fresh blood, you get people who actually, everything you always wanted to think about your business, but you never had time, you can do it with them. And then often what happens, if you have a proper relationship, then you have your entry point to another market, because as they're supposed to be from a different country, you can just start a normal business partnership. I really encourage you to look at this. And again here, you can be either the end user, so the host entrepreneur or a young entrepreneur, or you can be a intermediary organization who organizes the matchmaking. For that, if you have questions, I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. They get some money to come, to move, but not too much because it's not supposed to be a traineeship, okay? You're supposed to be still entrepreneur, and as a young entrepreneur to go, you have to have a business plan. It doesn't have to be super elaborate, but it has to make sense. You have to demonstrate that you are more or less serious. And the results are that people who go through this program, actually when they do establish their business, are much more likely to survive. Solvit. Solvit is another hidden gem, I would say. People don't know about that. You can ask a question around these topics, and you do get an answer, and 80% of Solvit cases actually get solved. Christine, I'm not an expert on Solvit. Should I add something important?
No, I think it's just, we have Solvit, and we have the tool which is used very much by individuals. It's called Your Europe. And there, it's fundamentally about a very practical problem where you cannot just look at the website and find information, but when, for instance, you have an issue with the local authorities, maybe where you live, that, I don't know, your degree is not recognized or something, although it should be according to the papers you have seen. And I would say it's almost like, a mediator who pushes, and what we do in the system is we bring together the two concerned authorities, and we try to find a solution. Sometimes it actually turns out when you have a case that there's a legal problem. That actually there is, and then we will actually take it up at the legal level. But very often these are actually practical problems that one authority doesn't really know what they have to do, because let's face it, practical life has become quite complex, and very often authorities are not necessarily bad meaning, but they simply don't know what to do when they see a paper in a foreign language, etc. So this is a very pragmatic tool. And there we have, very good results. What I would like to point out is that it works. This used to be my previous responsibility. That's why I know it quite well. We have a lot of requests from citizens who have, recognition of driving license and stuff. But we didn't have that much from business so far, because businesses were a bit more worried, thinking, well, if I have an issue with the authority, if ever I sort of complain, maybe then afterwards they will make life even more difficult for me. And now actually this has expanded in terms of business cases, and it has become much more normal, and people realize that it doesn't create so many problems if they actually choose this route, because the objective is to find solution, and it doesn't mean you complain and you will get then a much less cooperative person in your public authority the next time round.
Okay, thank you very much. So that was Solvit. Then, so this was removing barriers, finding information, navigating. We're also working on something called Digital Single Gateway that is supposed to be a more advanced Your Europe, because the Your Europe portal exists. There you really have access to, if you want to do business in another country, everything should be there. This is managed by the member states, but we try to stimulate certain level of quality. But there is going to be upgrade of Your Europe. This will be called Digital Single Gateway, so that some procedures you will also be able to do online. Then on the ecosystems, there's a lot of talk about ecosystems here. We also try to connect them across Europe. We always, in speeches we say, in Europe we have not one but many Silicon Valleys. It's just to illustrate, as we said already, there are hubs around Europe, but how do you sort of recreate this jogging experience for Silicon Valley that, the entrepreneurs, when you talk to them and they want to give you a nice story about Silicon Valley, when I have a problem, I go for a jog and I always find another founder, and then we have a chat over coffee, and then it gets solved. Okay, it's a little bit hard to jog from Warsaw to Lisbon, but can we do something to be a bit more clever with what we have? With the skills, with the research, with the good ideas, business ideas we have. So we try, and especially my colleagues in DG Connect. So we are DG Grow. We are like a ministry responsible for the single market, and then there's the kind of ministry responsible for connectivity and the digital single market, and they have a lot of calls that aim to interconnect the ecosystems across Europe. They also have some research money. So it's good to have a look at the Startup Euro Club. They also have matchmaking programs to link startups to corporates. And recently they also started with scaling up events where selected scale-ups get to meet investors. What we are starting now to do is to connect we have a project that's starting now to connect startups with mid-sized companies. Because mid-sized companies, they usually don't have this innovating capacity. So we are trying to come up with a methodology. What do you do if you are not big, not small, but you want to start innovating? So we are looking for startups that would be interested in such collaboration, and we're looking for mid-sized companies from across Europe. This is really, like if you're looking for money, this is your thing. This is called SME instrument. We have simplified it, believe it or not. And this time round, the next deadlines for submission of projects is 7 May and 23rd of May for instrument phase 1, phase 2. I'll leave you to study what is phase 1, what is phase 2. The most important thing is, usually you know the Commission, if you know the Commission funding programs, it's for a specific topic. Here there's no specific topic. It can be in any area, and I find it really interesting. And also what our colleagues dealing with that added is that not only you submit papers, tons of paper, there's also a meeting at some point. So if you get through the paper part, there are interviews. So there you can really sell, I think. So we will be ourselves interested to know how this is going to go, but you have the link here, and you have the deadlines of the upcoming calls here, and SME Instrument is the name. And then I will not spend time on this because this is going back to policy. So we do a lot on procurement opportunities. This is interesting both for government officials and for entrepreneurs. When we write our tender documents, we try to make them SME friendly. It's not easy. So what does it mean SME friendly? Not tons of paper, payment conditions that allow you to survive by the time you get paid. Shorter turnaround times, there are specific criteria. So we try to do it, we try to walk the talk. It's not always easy. If you have specific cases that you know of where you are like, ripping your hair out, let us know. And for the overall message is actually the financial regulation that we work with in Europe is quite flexible. It's just what happens is if I have to write a tender and it's my responsibility, it's better to make it a bit more stringent because you never know, I will cover my bum just in case. So we're trying to do away with that. And the market in the EU for procurement is 2 trillion euros. Okay, I have 2 more minutes because then I kept Freddie sitting here because we're building up towards something. So in 2 minutes, procurement is another area where we work on for scale-ups. Skills are predominantly member states' responsibility, but there are some elements. I have Evka there. You can talk to Evka about skills. She knows everything. Because actually finding talent is, for many, number one constraint in the EU. And if we could so we can move around. I'm Polish, I'm working in Brussels, but it's not always so easy to move around. Then there are innovation opportunities. So I mentioned the Horizon 2020 as the source of money. Our colleagues in ministry responsible for research and development are now working on something called European Innovation Council. So this is supposed to be this kind of ecosystem that will help to launch the research into the market. We also work on social economy and enterprises. There's a whole ecosystem around that. So if you're interested about this, it's also there. IPR, there's actually quite a lot of help on IPR that you can get from the sort of EU level. And then the sort of last one is the access to finance. So I mentioned the loans. What I want to show you really is the fund of funds that has been, so it's called Venture EU. And what happened a couple of days ago is that 6 fund of funds managers have been chosen. And now these 6 fund of funds will each invest in around 4 venture capital funds across Europe. This is supposed to make our venture capital funds bigger so that they match more the US ones, and so that they can invest in bigger tickets, because that was for scaling up, that was the biggest challenge. And here's the access to finance portal. You can select a country where you'll find sources of finance available in your country that are coming from the EU money. There's also EU guide for SMEs on crowdfunding. If you're interested in that, you have the link there. And last but not least, we have Galileo and Copernicus. You can get data. The data that is collected by our satellites is freely available for entrepreneurs to build apps on it and to do all sort of magic with it. So please be aware, because this is what our colleagues in Copernicus are trying to do, is to reach out to the startups so that people start using it and we can really make use of our satellite space program. I suppose you will get this presentation, no? And if not, I'll send it to you. Here you have the collection of links, and now, no, I don't have the... I hand over to Freddie. Thank you. I hope it was useful. We will talk after. So Freddie was one of the first people I met in Global Entrepreneurship Congress in Milan. And our friendship lasts still, and now Freddie has done something really fantastic at the European level.
Thank you, Kasia. Yeah, what you see here is a title of a memorandum of understanding, as we call it, where with the European countries we're going to sign some sort of cooperation agreement that will go a little bit further than we are doing right today. What is important for all of us is that this will be broadened. So we want to be really inclusive, and we will reach out to anything around 70 to 100 organizations in Europe to become part of this family. And then we will hopefully be able to share best practices in a better way, but also identify projects in an easier way on which we can then work together. So I'm not going to go into detail. It will be published soon, so you will all see that. But what I would like to ask is the GEM country people that are here to step forward for a photo, so we can put that for the future archives. Thank you. So, European, Jen, please. Huh? And Christine, of course. And Kasia, you need to join us. Huh? Hey, how are you? Good to see you. So, we should sing a song now, or? And
European hymn.
And
European.
our photo shooter is gone, or?
Shall we do 2 rows, actually?
2 rows? One more.
Everybody says Jen Europe! Oh, there he is.
There is
The official one.
official one.
Thank you.